Okay, Teresa, I think we are 1 minute to showdown here and getting ready to stream live. I will confirm in 1 second that we are actually on LinkedIn, and there we are. Teresa, I think we are 1 minute to. All right. Welcome to Thursdays with Culture Talk. We are back. I am Cynthia Forstman, and I am dialing in from Denver, Colorado, where we're expecting a beautiful spring day. And I'm with Teresa Agresta. Teresa, you are where?
I am in Saratoga Springs, New York.
Awesome. Welcome. If this is your first time listening to Thursdays with Culture Talk, we come here live on LinkedIn once a week to talk about culture. The name of our organization is Culture Talk. We talk about culture. And if you pay any attention to business news, you'll notice that everybody is talking about culture. We seem to be in a moment where a lot of things are converging, right? We have talent shortages. We have social justice issues like DEI and ESG, things that companies are starting to become concerned about. Teresa, I think yesterday you quoted that 80% of all DEI hires have happened in the last year.
Yeah, what a flurry of activity to understand that 80% of the people in that position. So it's like a little industry blooming.
Yeah.
You know, imagine there's a lot of positives and some challenges associated with an enormous amount of uptick in those positions and in that field.
Yeah, and we also have all this shifting expectations in the workplace, right? We have people working from everywhere and anywhere.
In the place or out of the place, because this whole conversation of, and the other thing I've seen is, you have in the office, you have remote, and you have hybrid. Now the big question is, is everybody exhausted from trying to do hybrid? Is it even going to be a thing? Should it be a thing?
Should it be a thing?
Lots of conversation.
So all of these things are related to culture, and CEOs are getting the message, right? They know culture is something that they need to get their arms around and find a way to manage. But we also know that culture can feel very intangible and hard to manage. How do you impact all of this shared experience that we create in our organizations? And so Culture Talk is a platform that we have developed and has been out in the market for several years. And we have a community of practitioners using the platform and tools that we call Culture Talk. And they are designed to make culture a tangible thing. They are designed to help L&D teams, to help consultants that get involved in culture initiatives, whether they be related to talent and recruiting and engagement, or whether they be related to organizational issues like branding, employment branding, merging, to take all of these big complex problems and challenges that leaders need to solve to move strategy forward, and to create a methodology, a system to simplify all of that complexity and give us a way to talk about it and get in the same conversation.
Yeah, culture is like the red thread that kind of ties all those things together. It touches everything. So if you can get your arms around it, it gives you a tool that can have a positive impact on pretty much everything in the organization.
So if you are somebody that is tasked with help with this culture initiative or help with this talent initiative, there are many ways to get involved with Culture Talk. The signature one is we have a certification program where we do train in-house learning and development teams. We train consultants, we train coaches how to take this tool set. If you want to hear more about certification, our next classes are coming up April 5th, and you can reach out to either Teresa or I, or go to getcertified.culturetalk.com. We also have planned next week a webinar. It's probably our favorite webinar. It's called Make Culture Work. And we, in that webinar, share a little kind of new thinking, provocative thinking about what is the value of culture and how do you value culture? And again, we go through a 5-step process or 5 principles for how can you make it tangible in your business. So check out the webinar. It's listed on the Culture Talk LinkedIn page. It's next Tuesday, the 29th. Check out the certification program if that's of interest. But let's get into today's content. We have done 3 in a row, or this is the 3rd in a row of a series we've been doing around Culture Talk. We talked around Culture Talk and teams. How are coaches, consultants using it in a teaming environment? We talked last week about Culture Talk for executives. How can this framework and these tools be used to develop the leaders in the organization? And really, any individual is a leader, and how can we use the tool set that way? We have blogs on the Culture Talk website on both of those recent conversations, so catch them. They're our latest 2 blogs. And today, we are here to talk about Culture Talk for organizations. Teresa.
Right. Yes. So Culture Talk for organizations. One question you might be wondering is, how do you actually measure culture? This is a tool that makes culture tangible by measuring patterns, by helping people who are working on these big initiatives to break things down and to create a smaller, understandable framework within which you can lead really impactful conversations. And the reason we can promise that we can do that is because we are using the framework of archetype to look at organizational culture. And what happens when you measure organizational culture using these behavioral patterns, these storylines, is that people don't get nervous about the outcomes. CEOs aren't saying, oh my God, you're going to come back and give me, a result that shows we have a bad culture, that I've failed in my job, and that people are, leaving my workplace because of the culture. Instead, what the results of an archetype assessment reveal is, what are the behaviors, the underlying beliefs, the drivers that are creating the activities, the choices and decisions, and the experience of working for your organization or working with your organization, if you're talking about customers. And so by measuring those archetypes.
Yeah. Give us an example, Teresa.
Yeah, well, so for instance, when people learn that their culture is based on the hero archetype, they start leaning in. They start understanding that there are some really important positives, strengths that are aligned with that culture pattern. Right. And they can start to tell stories about their own experiences and detail where they see it showing up. The evidence just kind of comes pouring out. And instead of getting nervous and sitting back, people lean in and start relating. And then on the flip side of that, they might also learn that, wow, the hero archetype pattern has some shadow sides, some downers, some natural areas where, because we're strong in this, we have some challenges. By the same thing, we create the strength, and we also create the challenge when we lean into a particular pattern. And so the vulnerability is also really important. People to be able to say, yeah, that's us too. And this is the way I've experienced it from that perspective, from the shadow side. And so using the archetype framework to assess the culture allows people to lean in, feel safe, share authentically, and be vulnerable in ways that help the organization to move forward. And ultimately, that's when culture becomes tangible, when we can use it to have meaningful conversations, when we can use it to drive strategic decisions. So we can help align, the underlying soft, aspects of who we are as human beings and the stories we're living in with the outcomes we're trying to create from a business perspective, because you can't leave that out. I mean, you might think you could with the hard-hitting business choices, right? You drag along all those human beings that make up our cultures with you. And so you can decide not to address them and it'll come back to bite you, or you can decide to open the door to these conversations and to align these things and have really impactful outcomes by addressing the culture.
Yeah. So just to underscore what you shared, if you are working with a leader and your CEO says, no, I don't want to assess the culture. God help us. I don't want
Right.
to, I'm fearful of what we might learn. And it is an invitation to say there is no wrong or right culture. Right. I think that's a myth that some has been perpetuated, that like, oh, if you do all of these things,
Yeah,
you'll have
it's easy to check the box that way, right?
right. And that there's a right culture. The fact is that there is no right culture. There is the culture that exists in your organization, and in everybody's organizations. There's positives to that, and there's what Teresa referred to as the shadow side of that same storyline. So uncovering that, becomes an opportunity in so many ways.
Right. And I think that one thing that's also critical to point out is this is not like an engagement survey where you're looking at, are people engaged within your culture? It really is a deeper dive. And with Archetype, you can do a deeper dive very easily. It doesn't take months of analysis to come up with this. It takes, participation in an instrument and a 3-hour workshop to have that kind of deep insight. And so it's fast.
Right. We all need things that are fast.
Right.
We got to solve. We don't have a year to think about this. We need solutions that help us get to things quickly. So another great point.
Yeah. Right. And so once you go through that experience, like we call it a baseline culture audit. And the reason it's considered baseline, it's foundational. We're going to maybe sort of explore some of the different ways that you can apply the outcomes of it once you go through this baseline culture audit. So the steps that we recommend are really measure. So you are taking a measure of the organizational patterns that you're finding there. Whether you're an internal consultant working as part of an L&D team, or whether you are an external consultant that is brought in to drive some of these maybe employment brand recruiting, change initiatives, mergers and acquisitions. There's so many ways we can apply this work. So you're going to do measure, validate, right? And those two steps form the baseline culture audit. And then you jump into apply it. So measure, validate, activate. So it gets down to a process that you can break it down, and it can feel much, much more attainable and very easy when you have a framework and a methodology for doing it.
Yeah. Let's share some of the ways we have seen the work applied and activated. So they've gone through that baseline, a company, a team has gone through that baseline culture audit. When Teresa and I started with this work many years ago, our doorway that we entered the conversation through was always through brand. We ran a brand agency, and clients hired us because they needed help with their brand. And as we walked through that door, the way we would use the methodology that Teresa just described, we would begin every single brand engagement by measuring what are the deeper cultural drivers, validating the patterns, whether they be hero, explorer, sage, caregiver, creator. There's all different ways that these patterns come together. And not only do they come together, they're sort of uniquely expressed in each culture. And
like a thumbprint, right?
Yeah, right. And it gave now the head of a company who's been struggling to kind of get everybody in a conversation about how to position ourselves, or who are we really? What is our story? Now,
what are we passionate about? What do we?
What gets us out of bed in the morning, right? What is someone going to experience here in our organization that is different, right? And it's even more than, what did Susan Radominsky say recently? Even more than differentiating your brand.
Yeah,
like uncovering that authentic essence of who we are. And what we would see happen with branding is that we could take the patterns, we could combine them uniquely to express, for an organization to build a story around. And even the expressions of it were so unique because people got into telling the stories about, oh, here's our hero, our explorer, our every person, here's how I experience it. And so when a brand kind of emerged through that story lens, it was powerful people, even the team, we didn't build those brands. We weren't hired necessarily to do an engagement program, but what you would see is that employees were all of a sudden engaged, right? Like,
exactly.
oh my God, this is so exciting to tell the story of who we are. So
and they felt heard and they felt included. And those are the underpinnings of engagement. You didn't have to go make it up and create ways to engage people. Just doing the work naturally brought that engagement out of people. They were connected to the outcome.
They felt proud to be part of this, and they wanted to share and tell the story. So branding is sort of the doorway we came in. And then once you have that kind of magic that we're talking about here of everybody's in the conversation and on board, a very natural extension of the work is to think about employment branding. And today, with talent shortages, everybody's trying to figure out how to bring people in, how to attract talent. But you kind of can't do a slap-on initiative, right? We can't do that brand as a surface level, like,
what does it take to attract
our culture? Here's the tenets of our culture, and it's, but if we can do it at that deeper level where we're really expressing who we are, and now we're using that to attract talent, it's a very natural extension of the work. So out of that one baseline culture audit, you're getting like a bigger bang for your buck in terms of now creating an aspect that you can put out in with the goal and with the aim of attracting talent through an employment brand. We do also have a blog on our website with a webinar we did a couple of years ago that's still a great way to look at that whole talent employment branding equation.
Yeah. And it extended, right? So people who have become certified on the system may have started with the brand lens and then really understood that what they're passionate about, what they care about is getting to people's purpose. And purpose is another driver in today's business environment that is starting to really obscure the whole mission, vision, values. It's going to take a little while, but this idea of what is our purpose, because employees really want to connect to something that they feel aligns with their purpose as individuals, as human beings. And that's where that engagement, goes skyrocketing. And so helping get clear about your purpose is another natural extension, even if you begin with a brand lens, and you're branding on top of that. So that's been a really cool outcropping.
Yeah, I gave a shout out to one of our partners, Kirsty Inns, who is based in Scotland and is taking this work specifically into helping organizations define their purpose. I think she'd be a great guest upcoming, Teresa. Just
we've spoken about bringing her on Thursdays with CultureTalk. So we've got a good lineup of new partners that are going to be joining us over the next coming weeks. So we're excited about that. Another way to think about this baseline culture audit is in the merger and acquisition space. I mean, you can't look at what's happening in business today without recognizing that the deals are through the roof. There are many, many people, business owners, who have rethought what their goals are in light of the last couple of years. Is this what I want? Or are they looking for some kind of exit? And so the merger and acquisition, deal pipeline is really strong. And you might be involved with an organization or a part of an organization that is either in the middle of a merger and acquisition or considering one. So another sort of scary statistic around that is 80% of M&A deals fail to achieve the expected revenue results they went in wanting because of the inability of the cultures to come together. And while, it's kind of foolhardy to think that people would consider culture before they did the merger, we really see an increase in people interested in immediately addressing culture as part of the integration strategy. And so that's another great way to apply the results of this baseline culture audit we've been talking about. So when you measure the culture of one organization and the second one, you can understand at their core, where are their motivations aligned and where do they vary? And it's not at all to say that they can't be successful. this is a way to help them achieve much greater and much faster levels of success, because they are not ignoring the elephant in the room. They're not trying to push past it, which I think happens a lot. They're actually stepping back and saying, how were we formed? What's the origin story of our organization? What did our founders instill in us? What do we care about today? What are the drivers and the impactors from our industry that are impacting us? Who are the people that we've attracted? They've got different stories and different, points of motivation.
Well, and I think two things to add. One is the tangibility, right? When you're coming together in a merger, like if you have a language, a common language that allows you to identify, how your organization sees the world, what's the lens through which we, get work done? What's the lens?
Right. And around that lens, we've set up in any particular organization the right way and the wrong way to do things. Right. Yeah. So even this understanding, it happens to be our way. This is our way. And we are very attached to it often.
No, it strikes me like, of course, we can say mergers like any marriage, any relationship of coming together. There's compromises and there's ways of getting to know each other. And to use the words you used earlier, like we need to do it faster. For a merger to be successful, we need to get those points of contention and stress and tension out on the table faster. And we need to see, and we've had a lot of success, both Teresa and I previously when we were running our brand studio, we dealt with a lot of companies going through M&A activity. And this process, again, that same culture audit that we did to start the brand could then become, a tool that we could apply again when they were bringing a new organization in, right? And trying to do that integration. So the ability to have that common language to see where those gaps existed.
Right. The gaps, I think, is a big thing with M&A. Yeah, I remember in particular one client, some of their feedback was that doing the merger was so much less threatening because we were so clear on who we were. We were really clear on our culture, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? The strengths and the shadow sides. They started to be able to recognize where those shadows were showing up and look them in the face and say, oh, we're doing it again. And to see that, coming together with another organization, there were going to be some sticky points because of the way we get stuck, right? We tend to get stuck in these areas. So sort of bringing that full awareness into the merger conversation made it so much more effective for two reasons. One, they knew themselves so well that they could understand where the sticky points for them were going to be. And then they were able to look at the other organization and recognize, hey, they got their own sticky points.
Yeah.
So let's have this honest, open conversation and let's identify, people don't fall in love, whether it's a merger or a relationship or anything, and say, oh my God, look at all your sticky points. They fall in love and say, this is going to be great because they see and they feel what they have in common.
Dream, right? Yeah.
Right. And where things fall apart is when, the romance is over and all the sticky stuff starts to show up.
It's just human. It's the nature of human beings working together and having a way to uncover and get at and talk about and resolve.
Another great success story I just want to share about, what DataBank has shared with us. They're deeply embedded in the CultureTalk way of thinking. And they first used the work and discovered some challenges between two primary offices that happened to be part of two initial, they were initially part of different companies.
Right.
They had such a different way of looking at the world. One came from a sage perspective, facts and details, slow, methodical, research-based. And one came from a lover perspective, relationships and, how an experience is. And so you bring together the sage and the lover and just have clash after clash. And when we were able to uncover that and they could just say, wow, oh my God.
Yeah.
They could start to hear each other through that lens, stop with the, you're wrong. And, this is the right way or wrong way to do things and begin to find a way through. And they did. It's a fabulous success story.
And back to, there is no right or wrong. in this, right? It's just discovering what is our way and where are the potential pitfalls of our way of seeing the world. Yeah, really, really strong case studies. What about change initiatives? We got a big project that just happened over the summer with a company in Brazil.
Yeah, right. So here's the story of, a very, very large company in Brazil working with a transformative culture change consultant. So the folks at Olivia have brought several people through our certification program, and we're going to host them as guests of Thursday with Culture Talk in an upcoming episode. And they can tell us more about the story that's unfolding where a very successful business had a leadership transition. So at the highest level, the original founder of this organization, one of the largest privately held companies in Brazil, was transitioning to a new leader, and how the difference in the perspective of that leader and what he saw as the future of the company was, needing to be brought into light alongside the existing culture that he inherited. And, how are the changes that we're experiencing in today's, business environment bumping into the expectations of the culture, the historical culture that had been so successful. So it was working, right? It was working for a long, long time for a reason and under a particular leadership. So we're really excited to, as this case study continues to unfold, to look at this, very large scale change initiative. Right. And really being addressed with a lot of honesty and intention to get it right. And so really looking at, how do we address this at the front end as we're going through the change and leading the change with intention by evaluating what is the culture of our organization, where are we today, and where do we want to be? So what's that aspirational culture? Yeah. And how do we paint a picture and create a roadmap that's not just this pie in the sky, but that helps to make that shift?
Oh my gosh, right? Because I think a lot of culture initiatives are pie in the sky if they aren't based in understanding what is the culture today.
Yeah. What's our point day?
We can just say, oh, we can paint a picture of this is this ideal culture, this ideal future state, but we have no idea how to get there because we don't understand how we're behaving today. And so this gives that reality check, again, not a good or bad, right? Just a reality check of how do we operate today? And therefore, if aspirationally we want to move into another experience, what are the steps we're going to need to take to get there? Right. So it helps us outline. And actually, we have another consultant that will be on a future episode, Claudette Rowley of Cultural Brilliance, has been working several years with a big culture shift initiative in the same organization. And the history of it is just that, the market of this particular manufacturing company was changing rapidly, but this existing company was 40, 50 years old, and they were very set in how things, it was a very happy organization. People stayed a long time, but it was almost like they were falling out of step with where the market was going and how they could participate in where the market was going. And so we'll be excited to bring Claudette in because she's actually measured the culture multiple years in a row to track the change that this company set out to do. They started again with that baseline culture, say, where are we today? And there were a lot of ahas around, oh, that might be part of the challenge we're having now.
Even the happy, satisfied employees could be part of the challenge in this story, right?
Exactly. So more to follow on that culture shift initiative. What else do we got upcoming, Teresa, as we bring it to a close here?
Yeah. So in the next week's Thursdays with Culture Talk, we're going to be talking about scaling this kind of work. Claudette's story gives us a little insight into how you take this and not just make it a single event, but really embed it into the fabric of an organization so that it becomes a tool and a language that everybody understands. And we can continue to drive, faster and more effective results by shortcutting our understanding, right? So this framework creates a shortcut to communication, to understanding, and to moving initiatives forward. And that's really, when in our perspective, that's what makes cultural initiatives scalable. So I can learn this about my organization. I can use it for brand. Now I can use the same work for mergers. Now I can use it for
it has brands. Substance, right? It's a shortcut, but it also has this substance, which gives it staying power and stickiness, to use our word from earlier.
Yeah. Yep. So next week we're going to talk all about that. Like, how do you start someplace at one initiative and drive the results deeper over time so that your investment in culture continues to pay off?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's next Thursday. We hope to see you back here then. We also, before then, we're super excited, as Cynthia mentioned, about the Make Culture Work webinar.
Right.
And in that webinar, we're going to be sharing sort of a new way to think about, to talk about. And I think this is really important for people who have been sort of handed the ball, right? Okay, here it is. You're tossed, I should say. It's probably even thrown the ball. You're in charge of culture. You're like, now what?
Right.
And what we want to do is give you some tangible ways of thinking about it. How do you go? And I'll throw a little hint. You know, there are other things in our business world that have become much more tangible because we've created a framework and a system around them. Think about money. Just going to drop that in. Money is intangible, and yet we have made it tangible systematically. So how does that play out when you start to think about these new conversations around culture? And if you are the one who's been tasked with dealing with it from a consultant or an in-house perspective, we've got some ideas we think will be really helpful for you.
Yeah, and to get people interested in it, why it's so important.
That's right. And then, of course, we are always excited when we are, enrolling people in our certification classes, because that's where we really get to spend 8 weeks together, diving deep into these ideas, learning about the, connection between individuals and organizations, and the way that you can bring these ideas to life across many different aspects of the business life cycle, as well as the talent life cycle. So there's lots of different ways that you can there's lots of starting points for working with this material. So we break it down, we make it fun, we get to know each other really well. And
it's great. You learn, it's such a community kind of experience too. We have lots of people go through certification and then they're like, oh, it's over. I miss it. I miss all those people I met. But we do have a whole community of ongoing support for our partners and a whole network of ways to stay involved and to have support through this community for the work you're doing in your organization or with your clients. So we'd love to see you.
Yep. So lots of ways to connect. We'll put some links down below. If you're catching us later, we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. We'll send you an individual survey, set up a call. We can have a conversation. And we appreciate your following and being with us today. So thank you.
Make it a great weekend.
Bye-bye.